Well, we keep things rolling on the holiday weekend. Larry Krueger and Lorenzo Neal with you. Hope you're having a phenomenal third day to your 3-day weekend. And with us on the guest line is Albert Breer from Sports Illustrated. And Albert, thank you for making time on the holiday weekend for us. We were talking before about your report that Trey Lance was a little annoyed in the aftermath of the Garoppolo restructure. What can you tell us?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me, guys. I these things tend to get picked up and and start arguments on social media. So thank you. I think it's important to make sure people know what I meant when I wrote that. And, I really I think from what I understand, Trey Lance's reaction I think was pretty natural. I think it's complicated news for him to take. And one of the reasons I use the word immediate aftermath is because I think in the immediate aftermath, you're probably processing a lot of things. When the idea that comes up, I think what was most important about it, and this is my feeling on it, what was most important about it was that the Niners were upfront with their guys about it, right? And so, after discussing it with Jimmy, the idea of it, the concept of it with Jimmy, and making it clear to Jimmy, if we do this, Trey is going to be our starter. And then discussing it with Trey, and then going to the leadership council and informing them of what they're going to do. I think they felt comfortable moving forward with it. So, I know, everybody's looking for, some level of drama to, tear this situation apart and turn it into something that's not right now. But, I do think the Niners, their ability to communicate clearly with their players on this sort of thing, I think, is what's going to carry them through. So do I think it was easy news for Trey Lance to take? No, I don't think it was easy news for Trey Lance to take. I think it's, something if you're him, you ask a lot of questions about, But, I think in the end, because the Niners did get in front of it and were pretty clear in communicating to all the guys what the plan was here, I think they'll wind up being fine in the long run.
Albert, take me back just a little bit further. How did we get there? How did the Niners get there with Jimmy G? What was the market like? Because he had to agree upon this contract. How did this happen? What made him agree? Did he not want to be released? So evidently he didn't want to be released. So explain that. Take us through that process.
I mean, hey, look, if he wanted to be released, all he had to do was sit and wait. You know what I mean? Because if he sits and waits, that until I think it would have been this coming Saturday, right? Then that $24.2 million base locks in is fully guaranteed, and the Niners have to make a decision before that point whether or not they want to pay him that. And obviously, they weren't wanting to pay him that number, or else they wouldn't have renegotiated the thing. So he certainly could have forced their hand. I think above all else, when they went through this whole thing, it's sort of a position nobody wanted to be in, and it was making the best of a bad situation. The Niners went into this offseason wanting to trade Jimmy. They wanted to get value back for him. They thought, before he had the surgery, that he potentially could bring back 2 second-round picks, which is the price they got for Alex Smith all those years ago. And Jimmy wanted to go start somewhere else. And because of the shoulder surgery, the timing of it and everything else, he gets that done in March. Now, he's not going to be fully healthy until halfway through training camp. And, another team is going to look at that and say, can we commit to the guy as our starting quarterback if we don't know what this is going to look like until at least the middle of the summer? He's going to miss all of our spring camps and probably miss a good chunk of training camp too. There wasn't a team willing to do that, especially when you consider that there's only 1 year left on Jimmy's contract. And so, that's why they got to the start of training camp and they were where they were. I think the Niners genuinely believed someone else's quarterback situation was going to change in a material way over the first 3 or 4 weeks of training camp. That didn't happen. And so, I think about 3 weeks ago, they're sitting there with a quarterback and no landing spot for him. The guy does want to start somewhere, but there's no starting job out there for him. And, they've got, an asset that they're not sure quite what to do with. And so,
are you surprised?
This solution I think was actually in part done to extend the window to trade him. You have another 2 months for something to change somewhere else. So maybe there's an injury somewhere else or something. And, in end of September, beginning of October, end of October, someone is in a desperate spot and they're trading for him. But at the very least, you're getting him back at a rate less than what he was going to make. The contract said he was going to make in 2022. And, and he gets money locked in for this year. And if there's an injury or something else in San Francisco, well, he's going to have a chance to showcase himself with a really good team to set himself up for 2023. So as you guys can tell, there's just so many moving parts here, but I think it all starts with where you were back in March, what the surgery did to this situation, and the fact that logistically everybody was in a difficult spot about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
The voice you're hearing is Albert Breer from Sports Illustrated. Craig and Chris were on it and tracked him down on this holiday, and he's with us as we've talked a little bit about Trey Lance. And the story that Albert has is that Trey was a little annoyed in the immediate aftermath of Garoppolo signing a restructured deal, which to me is not any surprise, or is it a negative reflection on Trey? To me, that's par for the course. But let me ask you this, Albert. Is it naive for us to argue, because I've been arguing this week, that the Jimmy Garoppolo restructure, there are those in this market that are arguing it's a clear hedge against Trey Lance and his ability this year, or his readiness this year. I think there's other factors here. One, you're taking an asset that had no value, and now you've got a valuable asset going into the season. And now you have an insurance policy against Trey, but you also have an asset at a price tag that now makes him totally more tradable. And I've seen so many NFL teams go to such great lengths to protect intel, and nobody knows your intel better than the quarterback. Could this be is the restructure partly in your mind about making sure that intel that the Niners have doesn't wind up in Seattle's room or the Rams' room? Because of, if they had cut Jimmy loose, maybe he winds up in one of those two spots. What do you think?
I don't think it was a driving factor, to be honest with you. I mean, I do think that there was a perception out there that Seattle could be interested. But, I think in the end, this was the Niners trying to think outside the box. And, if you look at Jimmy Garoppolo as an asset, what's the best way to maximize the asset, right? And if you don't have a trade partner, then Jimmy can sit there again and wait until this coming Saturday, and the Niners in all likelihood are cutting him Friday to Saturday, right? So now Jimmy's walking out the door. You're not getting anything back for him, and he can sign wherever he wants. If you negotiate this deal with him and you get this deal done with him, you, like I said, you have the ability to trade him if somebody else's quarterback situation changes in a material way. B, if you have an injury, you believe you got a Super Bowl roster, and so if somebody needs to come, if Trey's hurt, and misses 3-4 games, you have a guy who can steer the ship without question. And then C, if there isn't a trade partner over the next 2 months, and he's just on your roster as a depth piece, and then he leaves in March as a free agent, you're getting a draft pick back anyway in the compensatory formula. So, I look at all of those, I look at all of that, and it's if you just look at, the asset and what the asset was, what Jimmy Garoppolo was as an asset 3 or 4 weeks ago, is unless they can find a trade partner, they're probably going to have to cut him. Nothing's coming back. And they're getting zero value, from having had Jimmy Garoppolo on their roster the last 5 months. I think what this does is it creates value in having Jimmy around, and it creates value in that asset. And so I know the easy thing to do is say it's a hedge. And I think to some degree, if Trey and I don't think they believe Trey's going to fall on his face either, but if that were to happen for some reason, obviously there's an insurance policy there. And obviously it is a benefit that, he's not going to be giving the Seahawks information for week 2. But I don't think either of those things were, driving forces in this whole thing. I think as much as anything else, it was about where Jimmy Garoppolo was as an asset and how, the surgery really changed that and forced them to think creative and outside the box.
How good can this 49er team be And how much is dependent on Trey?
I think a lot of it's dependent on Trey. I think they believe they've got one of the best rosters in the league. I think if you got them in an honest moment, I think John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan might tell you this is the best defense they've had. The running game is, you lose Mike McDaniel, and I don't, think that that's a small loss. But, I think getting Chris Furster and Anthony Lynn to work in that area of the game, I think was big, and so I think they feel like they've got a lot of things working, and including the weapons around Trey, in the passing game, and having Brandon Ayuk, who they, and I'm sure you guys know this, think is going to develop into a very real, top receiver this year. Obviously Debo there, and then George Kittle, maybe the best tight end in the game. And I think a lot of this is going to ride on Trey and how they play Trey. I think it's and I think it's going to be really, really interesting seeing how Kyle Shanahan deploys Trey, because I don't know that he's ready to run the Shanahan offense the way, say, Kirk Cousins ran it, or even the way Jimmy ran it the last couple of years. So I think they're going to do some things to get Trey going and make him comfortable. And so I think it's going to look a little bit different than what you guys have gotten used to over the last 5 years. But I also have faith in Kyle's ability to draw it up and make it so it does hide some of the deficiencies in Trey's game where those exist right now, and highlights what he's really good at. And I think if you want an example of how good Kyle is at that, look at Robert Griffin his first year in the NFL. Nobody was ready for what Washington did that year in 2012. And so I think there are going to be some elements of that in the way that Kyle deploys his offense this year.
Couple more minutes with Albert Breer. We're lucky enough to get him here on this Labor Day. Who's coming calling for Jimmy G? Which team is most likely to come calling for Jimmy G in October outside of the team that loses a quarterback? Is there somebody that you see right now that, could be angling for Jimmy in October?
I was going to say, I hope you're not asking me to predict injuries. So
no. Bad karma. That's bad karma.
I do not want anyone to get hurt. I'll just say that up front. But obviously, there's always a possibility in football that somebody could wind up getting hurt, and so that's out there and possible. I think Cleveland's one that sort of, if Jacoby Brissett doesn't look a certain way, could they look at it and say, even for 8 or 9 games, it's worth it to bring Jimmy Garoppolo in, a guy who at least knows the bones of Kyle Shanahan's offense. What Kevin Stefanski runs there in Cleveland is similar to, he learned it from Gary Kubiak, so that'd be one. And I'm just looking at the teams now, guys, and you look at a Houston, it makes sense because Nick Caserio's there and he was part of drafting Jimmy in New England, but I think they really want to give it a run with Davis Mills and see what they have. Seattle, obviously everybody's talked about Seattle, but if Geno and maybe Drew Lock at some point aren't very good, do they get to the point where it's is it worth going and trading a draft pick to go get Jimmy now, or do we just want to wait this out and draft one next year? So that's where the issue is. So I don't think there are any obvious suitors out there right now. An injury may drive this thing. But I do think Jimmy's still got some value, as a quarterback, and that's why I think it's important to emphasize that the shoulder injury really was what drove all of this, and it's the reason why they weren't able to get any value back from him. I don't know if they would have hit their price, the price of 2 second-round picks, if Jimmy didn't have the shoulder surgery, if he didn't need the shoulder surgery, but. But I do think that they would have been able to get something good back for him if he hadn't been hurt.
Albert, last question. If I were to put you on the spot and tell me right now today, who's your 3 best teams in the NFC? Who would be your order if you had to? I
think the layup would be Packers, Rams, Niners. I think I picked the Packers to win the conference. I had the Niners in the NFC title game actually losing to the Packers. So. I think those 3 teams, I think it's much clearer in the NFC. If you ask me right now, I think those 3 teams are probably the top tier, with Tampa right there, knocking on the door. And the only reason I don't have Tampa higher is I worry about their offensive line. Like I see the number of injuries they've had up front. Losing Ryan Jensen, I think, was a really big deal. Capital left in free agency. Ali Marpet retired. So you're completely new, which the Niners are too, by the way. Guard, center, guard, right? And so, I'm a little bit worried about that. I also look at the age of their team, and I don't know. I mean, you played in the league a long time, right? Like, you wonder if there's a possibility that a lot of teams get old, or a lot of guys get old at once. So, I think it's the three I mentioned. I'd say the Eagles, the Bucs are right there knocking on the door. And the Eagles, if Jalen Hurts could take another step, would be the fifth team that I would look at coming into that group. So you asked for three, and I gave you five.
There you go. You really deliver. Hey, last one I have for you, and we really did appreciate you jumping on the line with us here on Labor Day. This is, in my opinion, the most compelling story in the NFL this year. I mean, yeah. Garoppolo, Lance, Shanahan, the Niners inside their Super Bowl window. They've gotten close. What is the second most compelling NFL story? And give me a surprise team. You've been around. I saw you in Niner camp a few weeks back. I know you've been visiting camps all around the NFL. Give me the surprise NFL team that you're looking for this year as well.
As far as compelling storylines go, I'm looking at the list of teams. I just think the overall, quarterback situation in the AFC, and to me, Baltimore, you look at all of them, right? So we've spent a lot of time over the last 6 months talking about Mahomes and Herbert, Allen and Burrow, and how great all the young talent is in the NFC, in the AFC at that position, and how it's going to look that way for the next 10 years or so. I'm really interested to see what happens with Lamar, in Baltimore, because all those guys I mentioned. I mean, Mahomes is the only other one that has an MVP, right? So Lamar's got an MVP. He's in a contract year. Does he do a contract in the next week or so? I'm not sure. I think they're going to make a real effort to get something done, but there's a possibility he doesn't. And, he plays a different way. And he had an injury last year for the first time that really took him off the field for an extended period. So, I think, in real time, we're going to get to see, is this sustainable? Do the Ravens believe it's sustainable by giving him the contract that proves that they believe that? I just think that Baltimore's quarterback situation, not that Lamar wouldn't be the starter for any reason, but I just think where they are with their quarterback right now and where their quarterback is when you talk about perception of what he was a couple of years ago versus how many people see him now, and it's almost like he's the forgotten man behind the other guys who are his age. I just think all of that's really interesting. And as for a surprise team, the Vikings would be the one that I'm sort of looking at, in that, I think it's sort of like the Raiders, and I've given some people the Raiders in the AFC. I think both those teams, you have a new coach, a new GM coming in, and those teams came in and were the tendency might be, all right, we're going to tear this thing down and just build really slowly, build it back up really slowly. Those two groups, the groups that went into Vegas and the groups that went into Minnesota, wait a minute, there's some really good players here. Maybe we don't need to tear this down. Maybe we can win right away. And so, I think I picked both of those teams to make the playoffs, the Raiders and the Vikings, because I think that the guys that are coming in are pretty good, and, I think that you look at where they are. And, I mean, the Raiders were in the playoffs last year, and they add a franchise-level player on each side of the ball, and Adams on offense and Jones on defense. And then, I think the Vikings, they've got, a really good veteran core, plus they've got guys like Justin Jefferson who are already really good, young, and should continue to get better. And so I think both of those teams might be a little bit better than people think.
Hey, we love your stuff, brother. Keep it rolling. Thanks for jumping on the line during the holiday, and good stuff. Thanks again. We'll do it again.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Albert Breer, Sports Illustrated, one of the best in the biz. And